Well, good morning, everybody. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, good morning.
Go ahead, shaking there. Okay.
Yes, good morning.
We'll just give it another minute or two. Looks like we have about 10 people so far. I've forgotten how many are signed up altogether for this.
Hi, Christine.
Good morning.
Good morning. Good to see you.
Good to see you.
I think it's supposed to be 90 degrees today, so this is a good day to talk about winter camping. I thought about wearing a ski sweater for the presentation, but decided I'd probably get a little too warm.
Can I ask you a quick question?
Sure.
Is this training can be added to the training section on the BSA page profile, or it's not? It's just for information to us.
I don't know that I understand the question.
Yes, I mean, how can we have this as a part of our training history, personal training history?
I don't know the answer to that.
Oh, okay. So maybe I should ask.
I would think you could, because I was just looking, somebody that I'm recommending for a Silver Beaver Award, the council gave me their history and it had items like this on it. So there must be a way to do that. But I don't know how.
Okay, yeah,
You can
because
contact the
we've been, this is our second year, and the last year it didn't occur to me to ask, but we thought it will be added automatic to our profiles, like the rest of the trainings when you take them on the website, but it didn't, so that's what I was curious.
Okay. You might, I would think that you might just go into your site and add it yourself.
Oh, okay. All right, thank you.
Let's see, how are we doing? We have 13. How many participants total are we supposed to have, Christine? Oh, you're on mute.
I will look for you.
How many are we supposed to have altogether? We have 13 so far.
Yeah, let me look. Give me a moment.
Okay.
We should have 24, George.
Wow. Okay. Well, we have 13 so far, and it's 3 minutes after. Let's give it 2 more minutes, and then I'll go ahead and start. And if people want to join after that, that's fine.
Okay, sounds good.
There's no test at the end, so if they miss the first few slides, it won't hurt anything. Maybe I shouldn't have said that. Maybe I should say there is a test at the end.
Right?
All right, when we get to the end, we'll ask you the name of my dog. That will help.
You haven't told the name
Are you
of
going to
your
tell us
dog.
now?
I'm sorry, what?
Are you going to tell us the dog's name right now?
Yes, please.
About 2 slides from now. It'll make sense when we get there. I guess I should wear a headset when we do this. It looks so much more official. I'm looking at Ian with his headset, and
Like an airline pilot, isn't it? It's just supposed to be big scouting.
Well, Ian has a wire.
I have a wire, yeah.
Yeah, I got these Bluetooth ones, so I can walk around and do things around the house. There's a meeting that I'm only sort of casually involved in.
If I'm walking around the house, I want to get away from a Zoom meeting. There's too many of them.
Okay, well, let's see, it's 9:05 and we have 14 people so far, so why don't we just go ahead and start? Um, if you were looking for Dutch oven cooking, you're in the wrong class. This is Introduction to Winter Camping. Um, let's see. I'm George Denise. My email address, in case you want it, is nspgeorge@gmail.com. My phone number is here. This is my cell phone, which is the only kind we have anymore. And if you want a copy of this presentation, I'm happy to share it. So send me an email and I will send it to you. My background is I've been involved with scouting, let's see, I guess 44 years, 10 years as a youth and 4 years as an adult. I've been a Cub Master, Scout Master, Venture Crew Advisor, Explorer Advisor. I'm currently Exploring Service Committee Chairman for the Council, and I'm on the Council Executive Board. Probably held most of the positions, so I don't know if that makes me any smarter, but I'm certainly experienced, or used as the case may be. With regard to winter sports, I learned to ski as a scout and as an explorer. In fact, our explorer post used to go skiing several times a year. I learned ski mountaineering with the Sierra Club in my 20s. And I was a member of the National Ski Patrol for 25 years. I've been a bear paw instructor for 27 years and director of bear paw for 5 years. But that was, director was many years ago. As I said, I'm experienced. My wife and I own the Ski Renter, which is a ski shop, rental ski shop in Cupertino. Scouting is what got us into that shop. When I was a Scoutmaster, I asked the owner of that shop if they would be interested in doing a presentation to our troop. They were. Somehow the next thing I knew, one of my sons was working at the Ski Runner, and pretty soon 2 of my sons were working at the Ski Runner, and pretty soon 3 of my sons were working at the Ski Runner. And one day, one of my sons came home and said, "Dad, Mike's selling the Ski Runner. We should buy it." And he laughed and I laughed. And then I got to thinking about it and decided that would be a perfect complement to everything else we were doing in our life. So we've owned the Ski Runner for about, 13 years, I guess now. So anyway, that's how I got into all this. This is the dog. Dog's name is Nuki. He's kind of the icon or logo for our ski shop. So this is a chance for me to blatantly advertise the ski shop. A very large percentage of our business is with scouts and scouters. And Nuki has long gone now. But this picture was taken at one of the bear paws. He and his sister, we used to take he and his sister, and they have a sled. And they would actually give sled rides at Bear Paw, and did a very nice job of it. That was my wife's and my tent. And some of the older members watching this might remember a rock band called Three Dog Night. It was never so cold that we needed 3 dogs, but and that's what that name came from, by the way. But we had 2 dog night. And my wife and I in the middle and a dog on each side. We kept very warm and cozy at Bear Paw. So, okay, this is the agenda. I originally put this presentation, it's evolved a lot along the way, but I originally put this presentation together for Bear Paw. And so this is the entire agenda. It's probably about a 4 or 5 hour agenda to go straight through all of this. So I'm not going to speak really fast and try and go through all of this morning. We're going to talk about the first 3 topics: how to dress for snow camping, snow shelters and survival, and what and how to pack for snow camping. We'll begin with how to dress for snow camping. And the sort of subtopics under dressing for snow camping are stay warm and dry, conserve body heat, maintain thermal equilibrium, protect head and trunk, strive for versatility, dress in layers, wear synthetics, fiber pile or fleece, Gore-Tex, thermal barriers, and if your feet are cold, put on a hat. So first, stay warm and dry. And the point here is it is far easier to stay warm and dry than it is to get cold and wet and then try and get warm and dry again, particularly when you're snow camping. You know, a lot of times our experience in snow, if we have experience in snow, some of the people that attended Bear Paw with me had never been in snow before even. But generally, most of us have gone skiing or snowboarding, or at least gone and played in snow. And you go out and spend some time there and you get cold and maybe you get a little wet, maybe your feet get wet or your hands get wet. So you go inside the lodge or the restaurant or whatever is handy, and you go stand by the fire and warm up a little bit and go get some chili and some French fries or nachos or something and warm up and get dry or semi-dry and go back out and play some more. When you're camping in the snow, there's no lodge, there's no restaurant, there's no fire to go. Well, you may have a fire, that's a possibility. Generally speaking, I recommend against fires. Maybe one for the program, but another rule or adage that I'll have to add to this program, to this presentation. But if you're standing by the fire and it feels warm, you're probably not dressed properly for snow, because just as it should be, you should be insulated to hold your own heat in. You should be so well insulated that the outside fire is not doing that much for you. But just something to keep in mind is that it's far easier to stay warm and dry than it is to get wet and cold and then try and get warm and dry again. Generally, these are the ways we lose heat when we're in cold conditions. Conduction, convection, respiration, radiation, evaporation. About 55% of our heat loss is generally through radiation. And according to how you're dressed and what you're doing, these percentages are going to change a lot. So don't write them down necessarily, or at least don't hang your hat on them as being absolutes. Evaporation, about 21%, respiration, 2 to 9%, conduction and convection, 15%. So radiation, generally radiation, that's the way the sun's heat gets to the earth, right? It radiates through space. And so heat can radiate off of our body, and that's one of the primary ways we lose it. Respiration is the moisture and the heat that comes out when we're breathing. Evaporation, generally we always have moisture on our body and it's evaporating. Evaporation is a cooling process. And conduction, if you put your hand down on the snow, it feels very cold. That's because heat is being conducted from your body into the snow. Convection is really the same thing, but with air. As air passes by you, when you feel a breeze, for example, it feels cool. That's because it's, again, drawing heat out of your body. So one of our goals is to cover up and minimize all those heat losses so that we're staying warm. Heat loss is greatest when the body's in direct contact with cold water. The body can lose 25 to 30 times more heat when in contact with cold, wet objects rather than in dry conditions or with dry clothing. So with wet clothes on, heat loss is increased by about 5 times. And again, these numbers are clearly approximate because various conditions are going to change them, but these are good rules of thumb, so to speak. There will be a test on this chart, so you may want to make note. No, I'm kidding. It's here for concept only. And it basically shows the relative conductivity of various materials. You notice one of the least conductive is air. That's why we use air in insulation. A lot of effective insulation is simply creating dead airspace so that heat loss or heat can't travel through it, that it's insulated, it's held in. Excuse me. If you go down to cotton fabric and wet cotton fabric and water, number one, you'll note that water is an extremely good conductor of heat, one of the best. So again, you want to stay dry. Cotton fabric compared to up above wool or down or polyester um, is not a very good insulator. It's has good conductivity. However, when it gets wet, it's increases, increases again, what, maybe 5 times as great, 6 times as great. So generally speaking, another rule of thumb is don't wear cotton fabrics when you're in cold conditions, and particularly in snow, and particularly if you're spending the night. You know, if you're there to play for the day, you can go get wet, play in 2 pair of jeans or something, get wet, go get in the car, turn on the heater and warm up again. But snow camping, there's no heater. I'll go back for a second. Actually, if you look at down, the second item down, it's a very poor conductor, meaning it's a very good insulator. Down is basically lots and lots and lots of tiny feathers with loft, meaning they're very loose and holding airspace. So there's lots of dead air in them. However, if down gets wet, it loses that loft and then it ceases. I should find the conductivity numbers for wet down also, but it's about like wet cotton. So down is great for people who use it correctly and protect it. For youth, I find it's not very effective because they have a tendency to get wet and it loses all of its insulating ability when it's wet. So while it's a good insulator, I don't recommend it for youth in snow camping. You want to dress in layers. The outer shell, insulating layer, and then on the inside an inner wicking layer. All of these you want to be synthetics, and we'll talk about synthetics a little bit, but the inner wicking layer, its primary purpose is to capture moisture and wick it away from your body so it's not being held against your skin. And using synthetics, they do a very good job of that. Cotton does the opposite. It gets wet and holds it. During the summer, wearing cotton is a good idea because you perspire, it gets wet, and it evaporates and draws heat out of your body and has a cooling effect. But again, synthetic, a tight fitting inner layer is your wicking layer, and very effective. Insulating layer, that can be layers. Generally, we want to dress in layers so that as we get warm, we can take off layers. As we get cold, we can add layers. So don't look at the insulating layer as a single layer. Look at it as perhaps 2 or 3 in many cases. Generally, you want something that's going to insulate. Typically, fleece, synthetic fleece. I say synthetic fleece because there are fleeces that are made from wool, which works pretty well. Also, wool is also a very good insulator, even when wet. And excuse me. There is a cotton fleece, and you wouldn't want to use that. But insulating layers, and again, maybe a couple. And then outer shell is to protect you. And the outer shell is also more than 1 layer. You may want something on that breathes and is going to hold off the wind and block the wind and shed light water. But you don't want something that's waterproof necessarily, because what happens if something is waterproof is it's going to hold the moisture coming off of your body inside that shell. And when it hits that shell, it's cold, it's going to condense back into moisture. You're going to get wet inside. So you want something that repels water but isn't waterproof. And then if it is raining or there's wet snow, wearing rain gear over that, ideally a loose poncho versus a rain suit for the same reasons. If you have a loose poncho, the moisture coming off your body can escape around the sides of the poncho more easily. If you're wearing a wetsuit, it fits a little tighter, a little snugger. Typically is tied around the neck, around the wrists, around the waist. And if it has a hood, it's going to be fairly tight around the hood. It'll capture that moisture coming off your body and condense it into water again. Um, so I think a poncho is probably better. Synthetic materials, such as polypropylene or polyester, um, have a very low water absorption factor. Polypropylene absorbs less than 0.1% of its weight in water. Instead, it wicks moisture away from your body. I forget the exact number for cotton, but going back to that for a second. Oh, I've got it at the bottom of the slide. I forgot to put that in. Cotton absorbs up to 24 times its weight in water. So it's kind of like wet cotton. It's kind of like just being in water. But again, synthetics wick moisture away, and wool also wick moisture away from your body. And again, that's important because we lose body heat much more rapidly through water than we do through the air. Use thermal barriers. This is something that I actually learned in Bear Paw many years ago. But putting a plastic bag between your inner sock, wear a synthetic sock, then put in a plastic bag, and then put an insulating sock over that, and that will keep your feet relatively dry. The synthetic layer in the bottom wicks it away so that your foot doesn't feel too wet or clammy. Though I've heard some people say it does, but most people seem to, think it doesn't. And a lot of kids in my troops over the years did that and seemed to like it. It worked very well. And then the insulating sock over the outside of that, both to protect the baggie so it doesn't tear, but provide that insulation to hold in the body heat. Gore-Tex is actually a brand name. There are a variety of variations of it, but it sandwiches a thin, porous fluoropolymer membrane, which is what Teflon is. Teflon, again, is a brand name. Coating that is bonded to a fabric. So you have the Teflon layer in the middle, fabric on each side to protect it from tearing and so forth. The membrane has about 9 billion pores per square inch, which is quite a bit. And each pore is approximately 1/20,000th the size of a water droplet. So water doesn't get in, theoretically. We'll talk about that in a second. And at the same time, it's approximately 100 times larger than water vapor, so that water vapor coming off your body can get out. It's not perfect. It doesn't all get out, so you can still get some moisture inside, but not a lot. And if you're doing something, for example, like digging a snow cave, and the back of your head and your back are constantly rubbing against the top of the snow cave while you're doing that, it does get through. The pressure pushes it through. So some moisture can get through. So again, that's one of those spots where it's a good idea to wear that poncho with the hood up so that you're protected while you're digging a snow cave so you're not getting all wet. And again, the moisture coming off your body can escape around the edges of the poncho. This is just an illustration showing what Gore-Tex looks like, or Gore-Tex type products. You've got the membrane in the middle. You've got protection on each side of it. And then you have an outer abrasion resistant outer shell and a soft inner shell or liner. And as you can see, transpiration, the moisture coming off your body passes all the way through it, coming out. Rain comes through, water comes through, is stopped by the membrane and can pass back out again. So that's the whole concept, and probably 95 to 99% effective, I would say. It's not perfect, nothing's perfect. Something to talk about is how you outfit someone for going to Bear Paw. Chances are most of your scouts aren't going snow camping regularly. They may not have everything they need, but you don't want to go out and spend $500 on a new outfit so you can go to Bear Paw. That's prohibitively expensive for most of us. So long underwear, that's probably a necessity, and that's probably going to cost around $50. Um, you can rent it. We don't rent it at our store. We rent most of these things at our store. We don't rent long underwear because we think that's just a tad too personal. Um, one of our competitors, Sports Basement, does rent long underwear. But that's an item that I think you probably will have more use for, so it might be a good idea to purchase, but you can rent it. That's the only place I know that rents it. Snow socks, there's a good chance that you have good, thick synthetic socks. Boot socks, for example, Scouts do lots of hiking and tend to have good boot socks that are also made of synthetics or a blend of wool and synthetics. And so you shouldn't have to go out and buy extra socks for snow camping. Fleece sweater, I find most kids have fleece sweaters these days also. And so you shouldn't necessarily have to run out and buy those. Insulated bib pants, and I say bib because there's less chance of getting snow down inside it when you're digging in snow shelters and so forth. If you purchase those, you might spend $85. You can rent them for $10. Again, we rent them, and the Sports Basement rents them. Our sister store in Mountain View, the Ski Runner, also rents them. REI is not going to have their winter rental open, or at least this is what they've told us. They're not going to be open this winter. But normally they rent them also. Same with parka. Chances are the Scouts already have a good parka with a hood. If they do, use that. If not, you can rent those. Don't run out and buy them just to go snow camping. You can also, we've shopped over the years quite a bit at Goodwill and bought used equipment there much, much, much cheaper than it would cost to buy retail. So another good source. Gloves, I don't know if anybody rents those. Sports Basement might, we don't. But you can buy a decent pair of snow gloves for about $19. I'll say from 15 to 20, 25. So that's something you probably should buy. The gloves are made the same way. We looked at the layers a few minutes ago with the Gore-Tex. Gloves are made the same way. They've got an inner lining that's a soft synthetic. It goes against your skin. Then they have a membrane. Good ones use something like Gore-Tex. Cheaper ones, it's just a kind of a latex layer or some other type of solid synthetic, using that same concept as we saw with the vapor barriers. And then the outer nylon shell, and typically with a leather palm to keep them from wearing out too quickly. So those are kind of a must. Sunglasses and goggles. Chances are the Scouts have sunglasses, but you can buy those very inexpensively also. When the sun is shining, you probably want to wear the sunglasses. When it's overcast, snowing, raining, the goggles make more sense. So probably a good idea to have both. Again, I don't know that anybody rents the goggles, so that might be something that needs to be purchased. Sorel is a brand name for boots. LL Bean makes the same type of boot. Comic, K-A-M-I-K, I think, makes a really good variety. But they typically have leather bottoms, rubber bottoms with leather uppers so that the upper breathes but still repels water. And the rubber bottom, when I say bottom, I mean the part that would look like a normal shoe. Even the top part of that's all rubber to keep the moisture out. And then it typically comes up to mid-calf. There's also a version that is rubber bottom and nylon upper. We rent both of those. We rent them with a leather upper and a nylon upper. Much cheaper to rent than to purchase. And then finally, a good beanie, a wool or synthetic. And again, most of the Scouts have those, so don't rush out to buy those. by probably doing a combination of renting and using what you already have and maybe shopping at Goodwill, you should be able to get away with about 100 to 150 dollars. The reason I said have a higher number here is I didn't include Goodwill, but if you think about what you can buy at Goodwill, you can do much better. If you go out and purchase everything, you're going to spend $500. And I put this together probably at least a year ago, if not 2 years ago. So some of these numbers have probably gone up even a little bit, but that's a good way to approach it, I think. And important information for the families, because you might find in the absence of some of these savings that a scout says, no, he's not able to go. And what he's really saying is, no, my mom said we can't afford it. And finding ways to make that work. Over the years as a scoutmaster also, I collected lots of extra socks and gloves and goggles and beanies and so forth. And having 3 sons helped because I had lots of leftovers. And I typically in the back of my car had a couple of duffel bags full of extra stuff because I inevitably had 1 or 2 kids who didn't pay attention to anything we said. And their parents didn't either. And we found ourselves redressing them at the trip. So this is an interesting picture, fun picture. Great snow cave, looks like, dug into the bank there behind them. I actually took this picture, so I remember it. It was quite a number of years ago. Great little shelter from the wind and nice little kitchen set up there. And you notice a little hole about knee height, maybe a couple of little holes there. Those are the refrigerators where they keep things cool. There's something very wrong with this picture, though. Anybody have any ideas? What part of the role are the scouts playing in this? This is a whole bunch of scouts standing around watching their scoutmaster prepare their dinner for them is what's going on here. So this is a great picture, which I enjoy, but I'd like to point out that that's not the concept of scouting. At best, probably the scout leaders are off preparing their own meal separately, or maybe better yet, they're the ones standing around and the scouts are preparing the meal and they're going to feed the leaders. So, but great picture, I think. So we're going to talk about snow shelters now. I haven't noticed, I haven't been looking to see if there's any questions. Have we seen any? No? Okay. All right, we'll just move right along. Do feel free to ask questions anytime you like. Let's see, it's 9:33. We have till what, 9:50? So I don't know if we'll finish all 3 of these topics or not, but we'll move along. So we're going to talk about 4-season or expedition tents, natural shelters, and thermal shelters. 4-season tents. 4-season tents are very similar to our regular 3-season or 2-season tents. I think John Muir wrote a book once, or a reference in a book, calling the Sierra Nevada gentle wilderness. And that's a good way to look at it. Don't think about the Donner Party, think about what John Muir said. But the Donner Party had other problems that created their situation. We don't run into those. Don't eat your scouts. But a good 4-season tent is similar, generally a variation on a dome tent. Typically they have aluminum poles rather than fiberglass so that they don't split as easy. They do bend, but they can also usually be bent back if you gently work them and heat them with your hands at the same time you're bending them back. They will typically have, where a regular dome might have 3 poles, they'll more likely have 4. They have 1 or 2 more poles just for extra protection against heavy winds. They have a rain fly that typically comes all the way down to the ground. My troop used to buy our tents. We found something called the Katahdin or Katahdin. I don't know how to pronounce that. It's the name of a mountain in Maine, but from LL Bean. That was a great tent, and it was inexpensive, but it had vestibules on the front. It had wind flies that came all the way down to the ground. It had aluminum poles. It just wasn't quite as heavily built, but it worked great all 4 seasons. But it'll have a rain fly that comes all the way down to the ground, which is ideal in snow conditions, both for insulating value as well as protection from the elements. Have vestibules, which think of as kind of like a snow porch. As you go into the tent, you get inside the vestibule. It still has a snow floor. You beat your boots off, or you might even crawl halfway into the rest of the tent with your feet still outside, and then take your boots off and whack them together to knock the snow off, and go on in. So it keeps the snow from getting into your tent, because once the snow gets in your tent and you're in your tent, you're providing heat in the tent. The snow is going to melt, and then you're going to have a wet tent. So you don't want that. So that's really the difference between a 4-season tent and something lesser than that. You don't have to have a 4-season tent. As I say, we were getting these tents very inexpensively from LL Bean as just one example. And they had the vestibule, they had aluminum poles, they had a fly that came to the ground. They were rated 3-season, but they worked great as 4-season. Something else you can do when you pitch those tents is build a snow wall around the windward side to block the wind and provide a little more protection. We never had an issue. Going back to my mentioning that John Muir called the Sierra Nevada the gentle wilderness, on one of our bear paws, we got a report from the weather that there was a heavy storm coming in. We knew it was supposed to snow, but we didn't know we were going to have that heavy a storm. And wind gusts were supposed to get up to 90 miles an hour, and it was supposed to snow 2 or 3 feet that night. So we notified all of the units that were there, let them make the decision. I'd say about a third to a half of the units chose to go home. Some of you may know Stan Kawamata. He's a scoutmaster within our council for many, many years. And he hadn't brought his troop. He just brought 2 of his leaders. I think it was their first time coming to Bear Paw, and they wanted to check it out for themselves. They had what I would call a 1-season tent. It had a rain fly around the top that was maybe 2.5 to 3 feet across on this huge dome. And then the sides were just open all the way down. They chose to stay. They did fine. The snow piled up around the sides and just insulated them better, and they didn't have any issues at all. They came out smiling in the morning. So an awful lot of snow camping is fairly forgiving. Again, you want to be wearing the right kind of materials. You want your layers, et cetera, but it's pretty forgiving. And you know, when you're there camping with 300 to 500 other scouts and scouters, that makes it even that much more forgiving, because there's lots of help. So this is kind of a picture of a good typical 4-season tent. We've already talked about what makes it up. Snow stakes. I'll just go to the next slide. These are snow stakes. Those are something you can pick up to use with your tent. These are sort of ad hoc methods of doing the same thing, but the snow stake typically is what, maybe 12, 14 inches long, maybe 1.5 inches wide, made of aluminum with these holes in it. And when you put those in the snow at an angle, the snow adheres all around to it and through the holes, and tends to solidify and freeze up over the course of about an hour after you put them in place. And the result is they hold your tent down very, very well, even in heavy winds. So they're, you know, the little tent pins that we use in summer don't work very well in snow. It needs something with a little more substance. You could use wooden sticks to the same end. You don't have to find branches in the snow where you are. You can bring little wooden stakes with you that you can buy, you know, for $5 for a bundle at Home Depot, for example, as an alternative. You can also get these without the holes in them. A good friend of mine who's not with us anymore, but was a scoutmaster for many, many years, Bill Flood. Some of you may know Bill Flood or have known Bill Flood. He hated the holes because it made them too hard to dig out the next day when you're trying to get them out. So you can buy this same piece without the holes in it as an alternative. I like the ones with the holes. I never had that much trouble digging them out, but you know, different experiences by different people. Emergency shelter, a couple of tents or branches using ski poles also, and just a shelter, a tarp or emergency blanket, space blanket wrapped around as a temporary shelter. Notice he's sitting on branches. He's insulated from the snow, so he's not pressing against the snow to minimize conductivity. He's got the shelter wrapped around him, the space blanket wrapped around him, and again, skis and ski poles or branches kind of holding it in place. This is the sort of thing we used to like to practice with our troop when we went snow camping, to let them build these things as a game during the day. If they wanted to try and sleep in them overnight, not that convenient, but just testing them and checking them out was a good experience for the scouts. It was part of the program. They learned a lot from it in the process and had fun doing it typically. Similar, this represents a tree. Down at the base of the tree, there's often a natural hollow because the snow tends to run off the tree branches and pile up around the base of the tree, but not right in by the trunk. Often it's wet down here, so you'd want to be sitting on branches to insulate yourself from the ground or the little bit of snow that might be there or the wet that might be there. But the same concept. In this case, again, it was a skier. He's using his skis to hold the space blanket off of himself, and at the same time wrap around it to keep the wind off, to hold in some of his body heat, and dress properly and curled up in a tight position like we saw the last fellow, to conserve as much body heat as possible. It's a survival technique, and one that the scouts can practice on their outing. Snow shelters include the snow trench, the snow cave, the cut block igloo, and the molded snow dome called the Quincy. On one of our trips to Philmont Scout Ranch, we used to drive, and I have a Volkswagen Eurovan that broke down on the way. And so we got picked up by a local tow truck, and the nearest Volkswagen dealer was about 100 miles away. And so the tow truck driver, one of the more exciting trips I've ever had, I swear he drove about 100 miles an hour the whole way. But he was an Eagle Scout and mentioned that in southern Utah, they didn't get that much snow. So they never were able to build snow caves and igloos, but they built what they called a snow trench, which he said they called coffins, because they were maybe a foot into the ground, 2 feet into the ground. And then they put branches over them and then snow on top of the branches to insulate them. But they were, 6 feet long, 2.5 feet wide, and looked kind of like a coffin. So that's what all the scouts said they called them. But it was an interesting experience. Snow shelters are easy to construct. They work well. You saw when we were looking at insulating materials earlier how well the snow insulates. And again, it's fun. If the scouts were there on their own, not as part of a scout group, they'd be building them anyway, and they call them snow forts. So same concept, a lot of fun. They enjoy making them. I usually had my scouts put their tents up first, because they may not finish their snow cave or their igloo, or they may change their mind about whether or not they really want to stay in it. And so if they set up their tent first and put their gear in it, their gear is protected. They know where their gear is. They know they can sleep in the tent if they need to, but at the same time, they can then go off and build snow caves and igloos. First couple of years that I took my scouts to Bear Paw, they weren't very good at it. They got to be really good at it. The older scouts showing the younger, which is how the whole program is supposed to work in part, right? And they had great experience. This is a variation of that same slide we looked at earlier, but notice that snow and wood have about the same insulating value. One difference is snow tends to be wet. If you put your hand on it, it starts to melt, it gets wet, and then it becomes super conductive. But if you're insulated from the snow, if you're, you have your sleeping pad down, your bag on top of it, maybe 2 pads. Insulite is the closed cell foam version. And again, I think Insulite, it might be a brand name, but basically the closed cell foam pad. And then Thermarest is a brand name, but that's the insulated but inflatable type pad that typically we open up the valve and over the next hour it kind of fills itself. Then you close the valve. I always cheat and blow into mine as well. Years and years and years ago, like when I was in my 20s, I was told don't do that because your moisture gets in there and it ruins them. I actually have the same Thermarest that I had then. I've been doing that every year for multiple times. My Thermarests are fine, so maybe I don't have a lot of moisture in my breath or something, but it seems to work. Trench shelter that we talked about a minute ago, some branches, a blanket perhaps, or the Thermarest or the Insulite pad. By the way, I like to use both. I put the Insulite pad down, and then I put the Thermarest down, and then I put my sleeping bag down. Snow cave. Ideally, when you put it in the hill, in the hillside, you want the cave a little higher than the entrance because your air tends to rise. If your entrance is up here, it's going to go out. It's not going to go down as easily and out. A little closure to also keep the air from going out, but you need a ventilation hole. A perfect thing for a ventilation hole is a ski pole. You can use a branch. Good idea to put a little red handkerchief or plastic or something hanging off the end of it so people see it and know that you're there. You don't necessarily want a snowmobile riding over the top of your snow cave in the middle of the night, but when you're on a side of a hillside with it, that's not likely to happen anyway. A little sleeping shelf, because again, with your body heat in there, it starts to melt just a little bit around these edges. The water drips down. You can actually put a little trench at the back of your shelf to run the water, to feed the water down to here and out. You usually don't get a lot of water, but you do get a certain amount of moisture, and it does very slowly move down and out. And if you have a little trench here at the back and this raised shelf, it tends to keep you much drier on the shelf. Igloos.
George?
Yeah.
Kalpana is asking, how doesn't the snow ceiling fall on you?
I've actually never had that happen. Going back again, by curving this, it tends to, it acts the same way that when you build an arch, and it strengthens. I'm going to talk about a Kinsey in a second, and I'll elaborate a little bit with that, but I've actually never had one collapse. Again, I'm going to guess over the years, my scouts maybe did 100 of them. Well, really quickly on the igloo. The first time I built an igloo, it was on my own when I was about 22 or 23. I went out on Crane Flat up above Yosemite, went out several miles, built myself an igloo, put a little candle in it at night, went outside and took a photograph of it, made a beautiful photo. The next morning I was rudely awakened about 6 or 7 in the morning by a bunch of snowmobiles going by. But I didn't build it in this spiral way. I built one row and then another row on top of it, another row on top of it. And it was dicey getting the top part in, but I was able to do it. The snow just happened to be the right adhesion so that it stuck pretty well. But the spiral going around and around works much better, which I only learned many years later. Actually, I learned that in Bear Paw also. This is a Kinsey, and basically it's like a snow cave, but they've made a big pile of snow. Then they stuck branches in all the way around so that they would know when they're carving out the inside how thick it is. You wanted it to be about a foot to 18 inches thick all the way around. And what happens after you pile up all this snow, just like I was mentioned when I was talking about the stakes, the snow congeals and gets hard. The most difficult thing we've had to do is at the end of the Bear Paw, trying to collapse the things because they're so strong. The scouts get up on top of them and jump up and down trying to break them down, and it's very, very, very difficult. So again, I just don't recall one ever collapsing. It was never an issue. It was something I thought about early on before we'd had much experience with them. But since it never happened, I stopped almost even thinking about it. Doesn't mean they don't happen. So, you know, having that arch inside is an important aspect, and both for that reason, for the strength, as well as so that the moisture has a smooth flow down to the sides and isn't dripping off the ceiling on you. Some of the tools to take along when you're going to build snow shelters: a regular wood, a branch saw, a saw for lopping off branches with a very heavy teeth works really well. The little folding ones, you don't have to make a special piece of equipment. Folding mountaineering shovels are great, but they're expensive. You can go to the UoS store and get a very heavy version of the military folding shovel. They work really well, but you wouldn't want to go backpacking with them. And you can make some of these things as well. We used to make a lot of our stuff in the troop. We used to make sleds to haul our gear on and so forth. That's a different presentation. I was hoping to get through packing for snow camping as well, but our time is up. We're supposed to end about now.
Mm-hmm.
So,
George?
Yeah. Oh, I lost you. You went on mute.
Sorry. Miguel is asking, how long does it take to make one?
First time out, probably 2 or 3 hours. Maybe an hour once they're experienced. I wouldn't hang my hat on those numbers because I honestly, over the years, got to the point where I didn't think much about it and didn't pay much attention. There's also a really neat tool you'll see at Bear Paw. I don't know if any of you went to outdoor Bear Paw in past years. A couple of you did at least. But you'll see a tool that basically is a long arm with a box on the end and a piece in the middle that sort of drives it down, and you fill the box with snow, lift it off, set it next to it, fill that with snow, and it just keeps going around and builds your igloo that way. That's actually a little faster than building them from scratch. And again, I think once you get going with that, I think you can build one in an hour or so.
Okay.
It sounds like a lot of work, but actually the kids have really a lot of fun doing it. And I've never heard any of them say, boy, that's too hard, I don't want to do it.
Mm-hmm. And then Bill is asking, will the council be holding a Bear Paw course this winter or not because of the pandemic?
I honestly don't know. I would think that in one way or another we would. I haven't heard yet. I did hear somebody ask that question the other day.
George?
Yeah.
Hi, this is Michael. And
Michael.
I just made an inquiry on this topic a few weeks ago. And the news that I got was that council is going to have a Bear Paw. They are planning one right now.
Oh,
it was something scaled back. That was the message. So
Okay.
that means exactly, I'm not sure, but I think that means we have to look forward to
Did they indicate it'd be in person or Zoom, or did they say?
no, a real camp out.
Oh, the camp out. Okay.
Yeah.
I was thinking more of the indoor.
Okay.
You know, the indoor session probably will be, if they're going to do an outdoor, they'll do an indoor. And I would think it would be done by Zoom rather than in person, because we can do it by Zoom.
Okay, that part I have no information to share.
Okay. Usually we do that in November, and then typically the outdoor is done in February. Anyway, it's good to hear. I'm glad they are. I've been an instructor every year for 27 years on indoor, and nobody's contacted me about that yet, but I did hear somebody ask at the council level a week or two ago about that, and they said they hadn't made plans yet, but they thought so. So anyway, again, I'm happy to share this entire piece. It's very similar to Bear Paw because I originally built it for Bear Paw, and the instructors over the years have all modified and changed and added their pieces to it. Theirs doesn't say ski runner up in the upper left corner. It says Bear Paw. But since I own the ski runner, I use this for minor advertising. Hope you don't mind. Other questions real quick? Okay, again, if you want a copy of this, you get the whole piece. Send me your email address, and I will send it to you in PDF form. And other than that, thank you very much.
Thank you so much, George. That was great.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yep, loved it. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
This was very different than the one we attended at our time.
Ah.
And it's really nice if scouts have an opportunity to listen to it.
Good. Excellent.
Bye, Christy.
Bye.
Richard, are you gonna close it down, or?
Yeah.
Okay.
How do we send you our email ID? Just